I was going to say, oh, it's so cozy, but the ring light is kind of overpowering. But you know, at least the background looks nicer than it has been. Anyway, hello, and welcome to, or back to, my channel. I'm Kit, and today, has anyone else heard of reactionary feminism? Before we get into it, I would like to note that I don't know Mary or Jordan, and these are my thoughts and opinions on the content they put out for public consumption. That being said, thank you for clicking on this video, and I would like to give extra thanks to my patrons. Links to my socials and Patreon are below, along with sources and resources, and now, on to the reason we're all here. I put it to a vote, and 87% said they would rather watch a video about Mary Harrington and reactionary feminism than Taylor Alicia, so well, I'm doing both, but Mary is going first. So, who is Mary Harrington? Well, she's the author of Feminism Against Progress and apparently the originator of the term reactionary feminism. What is reactionary feminism? Well, that's what we're here to find out. In July, Mary Harrington sat down with Jordan Peterson to discuss reappropriating feminism, maternity, and the woman's role. And I must say, I was really impressed with Jordan. This is the least I've heard him speak when doing an interview. Unfortunately, Mary, like Jordan, is also fond of word salads, but I think we can parse out what exactly it means to be a reactionary feminist in this hour-and-a-half interview. That being said, there's a lot to get through, so let's get into it. After Mary had a child, she began asking herself why motherhood was such a blind spot in the women's movement. And as she began to research, she realized it wasn't that it was a blind spot exactly, but that when someone sets out to make the case for mothers in feminism, it ends up as the poor relation that keeps being forgotten about. Mary wanted to know why, and that led her to asking if you can be a feminist if you don't believe in progress. Per Mary, she stopped believing in progress before she had a kid, but after having a kid, she realized she was still a feminist, but had questions about the women's movement. And honestly,
do you want to go back to being without the vote? Would you like to be the property of your husband, perhaps? What about all of those other ways that life has changed for the better for women? And I thought, well, this is kind of a head scratcher because actually, these people kind of have a point. But on the other hand, here I am, feeling pretty lonely and pretty invisible in terms of the women's movement, pushing my buggy around small town England. And I feel as though, in some respects, things have got a whole lot better, and in other respects, they kind of haven't.
I think she's upset that feminism didn't make her life easier as a mother, at least not in the way she thought it should, and therefore there's something wrong with it. And I am struggling to see what part of her belief system involves feminism. She doesn't think patriarchy currently exists, she's against divorce, she's against birth control, she thinks maiden, mother, matriarch is a woman's hero's journey. Where is the feminism? Thinking men are one way and women are another isn't feminist. But speaking of feminism, Mary's studies led her to conclude there's two different kinds of feminism. Feminism of care and feminism of freedom. Feminism of care seems to be women taking care of children and running civil society, and feminism of freedom seems to be about women entering the market on the same terms as men. So basically, feminism of care was the cult of domesticity that believed women's role was as wife and mother, and she should be valued as such, and feminism of freedom was that women need to be independent because feminism of care only works if your husband is a good guy. I don't think women who bought into the angel of the house thing consider themselves feminists, but anyway, freedom won. And Mary not only blames birth control for this, but she takes a page from Lila Rose and claims that birth control increased the number of abortions. We've already discussed this, I'll link the video below, but that is nonsense. Contraceptive use doesn't increase abortions. And for anyone wondering, Mary is deeply ambivalent about abortion, which I'm not entirely sure I believe, as she groups it along with birth control as something that breaks what's not broken, and she's against birth control for that reason. And well,
and really, I see that the 10-year arrival of from the legalization of the pill, approximately 10 years, to the legalization of abortion as our entry into the transhumanist era, because that's the point where women's existence as such comes to seem inextricable from a set of medical technologies.
Take that as you will, but does she know it's not a requirement for a woman to be on birth control? Also,
medical mastery of our own bodies has been radically accelerated by the internet, and particularly by the very disembodied childhoods that a lot of young people now experience, where they grow up socializing fundamentally through digital avatars, and then take as a matter of basic social justice the idea that they should be able to reskin their meat avatar at will. and which is, you know, combined with a number of combined with social contagion and common emotional pathologies which have been typical in adolescent girls since time immemorial. The upshot has been, as we know, the social contagion of trans identities.
Social contagion does not exist. Unsurprisingly, Mary name drops Louise Perry, and we'll get into her take on reactionary feminism in December. To be honest, I think she explains it better than Mary, and in short, Mary thinks we've reached peak progress and it's all downhill from here. She also dings feminism for demanding women remain maidens. Speaking of matriarchs,
and they're incredibly marginalized. They're almost completely invisible in terms of the liberal feminist narrative, which really centers the maiden. And it wants to foreground the maiden and to tell women that the hero's journey means essentially being the maiden for their entire life. And everything else is just, you know, the mother is pretty much, you know, at best, if the mother is noticed, it's as a problem to be solved. And the matriarch doesn't really get a look in at all. And if she does, it's only so that she can be denounced for being a TERF, or, you know, in some other way, you know, spat on for being, you know, a dinosaur or obsolete or, you know, old-fashioned or, you know, out of touch or in some other way irrelevant or ridiculous.
I wouldn't say demanding women remain youthful and carefree is feminism, liberal or otherwise. That's just capitalism trying to sell women lotions and potions about being ageless. And being older doesn't mean you have to be a dinosaur or out of touch. And I would be willing to bet that Mary has been called a TERF, and I would like to say that though Mary is trans exclusionary, nothing she espouses is feminist, let alone radical. And I want to be clear, Mary could have said, I think feminism should focus more on mothers and their needs and done work according to those needs. But instead, she's writing books and doing interviews about how,
in my view, patriarchy doesn't exist in the modern world. It's not real. It's not a thing. My stance on no-fault divorce is that it's disastrous. And my stance on contraception is that there's a robust feminist case against the pill.
Okay, please excuse this next part. We're almost done, but my voice is being really weird and annoying. And if you're wondering why Mary calls herself a feminist, well, she considers feminism to include a lot of things. That feminism of care mentioned in the beginning, she doesn't think those cult of domesticity women would have called themselves feminists, and that the feminists of the time certainly wouldn't have. But if you're speaking to ways women, as a sex, have distinct interests from men, Mary thinks it's reasonable to call someone a feminist. And her second reason is, why not?
The second point I would make is why shouldn't we have the term? I made the same point to Spencer Klavan to Andrew Klavan when he asked me that as well. He said, well, why would you call yourself a feminist, Mary? It doesn't sound like that's really what you're doing. And I was like, well, why shouldn't we take our ball and go home? Why should they have the term? They're not doing anything which is in women's interests, as far as I'm concerned. You know, what you're a feminist if you're sticking up for women's interests as a sex class. And if actually your project is about abolishing biological sex in law and culture, then whatever it is, I have no idea what it is that you think you're doing, but it doesn't read like feminism to me. So I'm taking my ball and I'm going home.
Right. And circling back to her objection to birth control.
It screws women up at the biochemical level. It screws up relations between the sexes. It affects mate choice. I mean, we're familiar with the contemporary research.
Again, no. Science has not concluded that birth control fundamentally changes who you are or who you're attracted to. And that was Reactionary Feminism 101. I'm underwhelmed. Basically, the things that are good for women are marriage and motherhood, and so it's not feminism if you're not encouraging women to pursue marriage and motherhood, because to marry and mother are women's nature, and we can't go against it. But we do, well, I'm sure someone will cover that at some point. Women who aren't interested in marriage and kids are probably just brainwashed by liberal feminism or something. Anyway, let me know in the comments. Would you consider Mary Harrington a feminist? And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.